And then they don't. It doesn't work. They drop the nets in over and over, which they've done 1,000 times, and they're pulling up old boots, seaweed, and beer cans. Okay, let's do it over here. Let's go over here. Different net, in this corner, that corner. Nothing, nothing, nothing. You can never go home again. Things are different now. They've seen too much. They've tasted the heavenly reality, and now the mundane, everyday stuff doesn't feel the same. For me, coming to really know Christ as a teenager, it was that social one-upmanship that didn't feel the same. After I'd gotten in touch with Jesus, or he with me, I couldn't join in the bullying like I used to. Now I was way down the totem pole socially, like way, way, way down. Way down. Way down. But there were a couple of guys under me. Just a couple guys. I can name them first and last name and tell you what they look like. But I could redirect the bullies to him. Say, at least, hey, I'm not that guy. Look over here. You know. It's him. Look at him. Look at that guy. Look at that guy. But as I got to know God, I found out that guy was a real person. A three-dimensional person. And when I knew Jesus, then I could see the rings under his eyes. And I could see the hand-me-down clothes that he had to wear. And he became a person. And I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't treat him like a target. I found that sending some insult in his direction hurt him. And that haunted me. And my nets came up empty. I could never go home again. When life gives you lemons, make lemonade. The acorn doesn't fall far from the tree. Those are free. I just wanted to see if you were awake or wake you up. Anyway. The one that we say in Nebraska when there's nothing else to do. My wife gets tired of me saying it. When there's nothing else to do, we say it's too windy to pick up rocks. You guys ever heard that one? No. It's one of my absolute favorites. Too windy to pick up rocks, might as well. Anyway. And there is Jesus on the shore. And now I love this here. They have lost their teacher and friend, someone who they didn't totally understand, but they dearly loved. And now life has returned to normal, crashed back down to normal. They're out on the same waters again. Even more brutally so, because the nets don't even work. And then they look up and there he is. There he is. And so often we get caught up in what we think will finally fulfill us for good. The new job, the new relationship, the new investment opportunity. Surely this will be what finally fills the need. Surely this will finally be enough. We'll find out one thing that's fulfilling, never gets old, never tarnishes. But all that glitters is not. All right. We find the relationship is difficult. Or the new house and the new car has dents and scratches on it. We find that after the honeymoon period, the shine is gone. And now I have to talk about one of my favorite movies. And I know I've talked about this one before. This is Son of a Woman. It's a movie with Al Pacino in it. I want to watch the edited version, like on TV. But he plays this miserable old man who's this aging playboy, who's a confirmed bachelor, who's addicted to many things, and one of them being women. And he just lives, he's going to live the last weekend of his life and then take his life. That's the whole plot. And Chris O'Donnell plays this young college kid who takes care of him for the weekend. And they have this conversation as it becomes, the hope starts to grow in Al Pacino. And he says, forgive my impression, he said, you know what my dream is, kid? You know what my dream is? And he says, what? He says, I want to go to sleep in the arms of a beautiful woman. And the kid says, yeah, I know. And he says, hear me out, hear me out. I want to go to sleep in the arms of a beautiful woman. And when I wake up in the morning, she'd still be there. She'd still be there. She'd still be there. And that is the key for Peter the fisherman. He's gone back to the only thing that ever fulfilled him to find out it doesn't work anymore. And after this idol and that idol, every pleasure and pursuit the world has to offer, to wake up lonely again. And here is Jesus, and he's there. He's there. He's not gone. It wasn't a dream. It wasn't another treasure that falls apart in your hands. He is there, and it was real. Peter the forgiven. Verse 9, when they got out on land, they saw a charcoal fire in that place, with a fish laid out on it and bread. Jesus said to them, "Bring some of the fish that you have just caught." So Simon Peter went aboard and hauled the net ashore full of large fish, 153 of them. And although there were so many, the net was not torn. Jesus said to them, "Come and have breakfast." Eugene loves this part.
Sorry.
Okay, so I'm going to do another Bible drill again. Can somebody read me John chapter 18, verses 17 through 18? John 18, verses 17 through 18. First one to win gets a prize of some kind. I'll make that up this week. You can have the rest of my coffee. John 18, verses 17 through 18. Oops, no you can't. All right. Anyone want to read it for us?
You aren't one of this man's disciples, are you? She asked Peter. He replied, "I am not." It was cold, and the servants and officials stood around the fire they had made to keep warm. Peter also was standing with them, warming himself.
By the charcoal fire. The charcoal fire. The charcoal fire. This would have been a familiar thing for them as a way to cook meals and keep warm. And yet now for Peter, that familiar smell would be the memory of how he failed. Only the first of his 3 denials, the worst night of his life, started with a charcoal fire. And Jesus is healing the memory of this. Smell is one of the strongest memory triggers that we have. And Peter would have been saddened by this familiar smell his whole life. But Jesus takes him right down by the fire, right down to the scene of the... Has Jesus ever taken you down by the fire before? Press down right on that most painful spot so he can open the wound and cleanse it and stitch it up. Doesn't always feel great. Our relationships, our circumstances, the community of the church, these are all tools in the hands of the Lord that he can use to do his surgery on us and make us well. He has used my kids like a scalpel in my life. 3 tiny little scalpels. I dreamed most of my life as being the guy up front, doing his thing, the guy laying down the truth, blowing it up. That's a fun noise. I've admired preachers I knew and would have elaborate fantasies about being the guy up there in the pulpit, blowing up the truth, laying down the word. And as we see with some regularity, my kids are not impressed. They will bounce right up here and latch on to me without thought. That's not the preacher, that's Daddy. That's Daddy. Daddy, when are we going to start talking about this boring stuff and go home? It points to something. In my relationship with my kids, which is pretty much me and Heather taking care of all their needs, sometimes I can smell my own self-focus. I can feel the sickness of my selfishness. When's it me time? My own self-centeredness. And in some blessed moments, I can feel the Lord start to cut that away. And that's wonderful. That's wonderful. Start to cut that selfishness out of me so I can be free of it. So Jesus takes Peter right there in the stink and the heat of his sin so that it can be dealt with. Right there where it needs to be dealt with. He is Peter the forgiven. Peter who doesn't have a leg to stand on, but he never had one anyway. Such freedom. And you can see the joy here. Jesus says to bring some fish, and Peter runs back and grabs all the fish. All the fish, the whole catch. If you remember right, it took half a dozen guys to try to get it into the boat. 153 fish, medium-sized fish, would have been about 300 pounds. And Peter grabs it, puts it on his shoulders, runs back up, and he says, "Here is my burden, here is my sin, here is my denial, Lord. Please take this from me. Please take this from me." Here it is. Peter the friend. Peter the friend. Verse 15, when they had finished breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? He said to him, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. He said to him, feed my lambs. He said to him a second time, Simon, son of John, do you love me? He said to him, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. He said to him, tend my sheep. He said to him the third time, Simon, son of John, do you love me? Peter was grieved because he said to him the third time, do you love me? And he said back, Lord, you know everything, you know that I love you. Jesus said to him, feed my sheep. Truly, truly, I say to you, when you were young, you used to dress yourself and walk wherever you wanted. But when you are old, you will stretch out your hands, and another will dress you and carry you where you do not want to go. And this he said to show by what kind of death he was to glorify God. And after saying this, he said to them, follow me. This is a very famous, but in the end very strange exchange between Jesus and Peter. A lot of commentaries picture the two of them walking off to the side to have this intimate conversation. I don't think so. I think Jesus did that right there in front of everyone, pressing down on that sin to get it out. It happened right there. We've gone from Peter the fisherman, the man who is desperately trying to go back to the way things were, who doesn't realize you can never go home again. And then to Peter the forgiven, the man who is taken to the same circumstances of his greatest sin and let go, cleansed and healed. And finally we are at Peter the friend, whom Jesus forgives and heals that relationship, but takes it a step further as well. I have a friend from Vancouver days who was a recovering heroin addict. He'd been clean for a while and found healing in the church community and his relationship with our pastor. And then he injured his hand at work, and they gave him painkillers, which you have to be very careful of. They gave him opiate painkillers, which are made of the same thing as heroin. So he took one dose and he was gone. He was gone. He went on a bender, finding drugs, shooting up, partying for 10 straight hours. He finally found himself somewhere in the bowels of Vancouver's downtown, the places he used to hang out all the time. And in this heartless, brutal, dark place, he was shooting up again, and he saw his wife's picture in his wallet. And he picked up the phone and got help. He came back to our pastor, Don, who of course took him in with open arms, but surprised him as well. My friend came back with his head hung low and his heart broken, the failure weighing on him, and Don said, I want you to go to work in ministry for addicts. What? And soon there he was, who had just been failing, running a halfway house for men in recovery. Totally turned it upside down. And the exchange between Peter and Jesus is similar. Look what Jesus says when Peter responds. Peter, do you love me? Yes, Lord, you know that I love you. Feed my sheep. Peter, do you love me? Lord, you know that I love you. Feed my lambs. He invites him into the work of the kingdom. He doesn't just say, yeah, it's okay, we're good. He says, you are forgiven, now let's go. Now let's go to the work of the kingdom. The work of the kingdom that is made up of broken, discarded, forgotten, colossal sinners, and always has been. You finally get it, let's go. Now come out on a limb with me if you would. Much ink has been spilled over the two words that Jesus used in this exchange. Peter, do you love me? Peter, do you love me? Peter, do you love me? So he used two different Greek words. One is agape, one is philia. Stay with me, sorry. Agape and philia. Agape is the unconditional love of God. Our closest analogy is a mother's love that reaches down and takes you no matter what state you're in. The agape love. And so Jesus, in the first two questions, says, Peter, do you agape me? Peter, do you agape me? And then he moves to philia. And philia is the word for friendship, the word for fellowship, the word for eye-to-eye fellowship around the table. And that is more a relationship between two adults. So my mother and I, we have this agape love. She picked me up, did everything for me as a kid. And now it grows into philia, where we are two adults who talked on that level. So Jesus says, do you agape me? Do you agape me? And then he says, do you philia me? A first-year Bible student will usually tell you that Jesus is going down the scale and ends with, Pete, do you even like me? Do you love me? Do you love me? Do you even like me? But I don't believe that's true. I think that Jesus is taking this up the scale. It is not downward in the book of John. Not in the gospel where Jesus says, I no longer call you servants, I call you. Greater love has no man than this, than to lay down his life for his. He lifts him up. This is a climax. Jesus asks the question rising towards the most powerful of conclusions. Peter, you are not a pity case. You are not simply broken and unsalvageable. You are my friend. You are my friend. I don't want you just because I am the Lord and I have to. I want you because I prefer you. I want to be with you, shoulder to shoulder. I want you to join me in my work. Get up from this breakfast table. We have work to do. And so Peter the fisherman becomes Peter the forgiven, becomes Peter the friend, becomes Peter the friend. Peter the fisherman. Have you been the fisherman before? Remember that you can never go home. That Jesus is calling you to new country and new things. He's standing there on the beach saying, come with me, there is further country. Don't stay back in old grudge matches and pet sins and old comfortable ways. It's not going to work anyway. You have met the Lord and your nets will come up empty until you follow His direction. Peter, the forgiven. Here Jesus takes him back to the charcoal fire. Back to the scene of the crime. Jesus not only whitewashes with forgiveness, but cleanses the wound all the way down. He receives Peter, but also restores him. And is there some place where He is restoring you? Is there a charcoal fire where He is waiting to share a meal with you? You have that forgiveness forever. You can always ask for it, and He'll always give it. But He also wants to bring you further. Bring you further with Him. Peter the friend. Jesus asks us not only to be